Me, we had some comments that Trevor Sikkema, he is the lead draft analyst at Pro Football Focus, and he sent Fritzy some talking points saying that he has not heard anyone talk with conviction about Shedeur Sanders being a QB1 in the top 10 or even as a first rounder. We attributed that to Matt Miller, ESPN NFL draft analyst. So, Matt, I don't know. Why don't you tell us how you feel about Shedeur Sanders? Do you think he'll be a first-round quarterback?
You can attribute that to me. I've heard all the same things. I think all of us have, especially coming out of the combine, Dan, where you all everybody goes to the same 3 restaurants in Indianapolis and talks late at night. We're all kind of hearing the same stuff. But I would agree with that. I think it's hard to find a team right now that says, yeah, that's our guy. You're crazy. And I just put an article out last week before the combine, or during the combine, actually, and it was ranking the quarterbacks from the past 5 years. Shedeur Sanders was second to last. Kenny Pickett was the only quarterback with a lower grade than him coming into the NFL. So that is in line with what I've seen watching the tape over the last 2 years. It's what I hear talking to as many scouts and coaches and general managers as I do this time of year. A lot of people want to like Shedeur Sanders. I don't get the feeling that teams love him. Not the way that they do Cam Ward. There's a sizable gap right now to where I think you could easily say this year there is a consensus number 1 quarterback, which is rare. That doesn't often happen. Even last year, with all the Caleb Williams love, there were teams that like Jaden Daniels. There were teams that like Drake May. We have a true consensus number 1 quarterback this year, and it's Cam Ward from Miami.
Okay, is this just football that we're talking about with Shedeur Sanders? Now, Cam Ward, we can get to him in a moment, but is there a smear campaign with Shedeur Sanders, or are people just being honest with the talent or performance that they saw?
So I think it's both. I do think that it's about football. He is 6'1". He put on some weight for the combine. He got up to 212 pounds. He played closer to 200 pounds. He doesn't have the biggest arm. He's not the greatest athlete. I know for folks who didn't watch Colorado play, he might be Deion Sanders' son, but he got his mom's feet, right? He's not a 4'3" athlete. But he is incredibly tough, and he's incredibly accurate, and he's willing to stand in the pocket and make some plays. I do think on the other side of that is there are going to be people that are going to see players differently. I've talked to young scouts who loved their interviews with Shedeur Sanders. I've talked to older scouts and general managers who were put off by him. And I think that's going to be the case for a lot of the new era of athlete coming into the NFL, where guys are making millions of dollars in college football now. It has prepared them for life a little differently. And so I think you are going to get a disconnect. I tend to not put a ton of stock into those quotes from scouts and GMs of, oh, we didn't like this interview. It's different if everyone tells you the same thing. I remember asking about Will Levis, and everyone I talked to said the same thing, was like, this guy is just like pent up. Like, he's trying to be a perfectionist. He's not smooth. He's not fluid. The conversations feel like he's going to have a heart attack. Well, guess what? He plays the same way on the football field. So that's when I think it matters, is when those interviews match with a play style. Shedeur's a hell of a player. There's not that love for him out there right now in the NFL.
Is Cam Ward being elevated because there is no competition? So he might...
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah,
absolutely. If we were talking about last year's drafts, Cam Ward would have been the 6th or 7th guy drafted, probably, at quarterback, not overall, at quarterback. And that might still make you a top 10 pick, right? Because those guys flew up the board last year. But I do think he's being elevated. It is interesting. Both quarterbacks, Sanders and Ward, they have some bad habits that are going to need coached out of them. Cam Ward's kind of get dismissed because he has a strong arm. It's like, well, he stands in the pocket way too long. He takes a lot of sacks he doesn't need to. He very often waits for the open man, but he's got a strong arm. So you kind of you make those excuses for it. Whereas I think both guys are going to need coached pretty hard when they get to the NFL, just to learn to play on time. Both guys have a little bit of that Caleb Williams mentality where they think they can stand back there and drift and wait for somebody to pop open and then they'll throw it. Well, we saw last year for Caleb, who I still love, that doesn't work in the NFL. And guys who can play on time are going to have a lot more success early. Both these quarterbacks have to figure that out.
Yeah, in college, you can wait, and then throw. In the NFL, you can wait, and then you better throw. So, I mean, it's just so much quicker. You have to throw guys open. And Caleb, was doing all this at USC. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who's a scout, and he goes, that won't last long in the NFL.
Right.
He won't last long in the NFL. If you think you can escape and improvise, and this scout said that he always goes back to Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. When the play was over, it was over. They went down in a fetal position. Live to play another day. But these college quarterbacks are so. Johnny Manziel, he was always going to get out of something. It helped having a great receiver there. But I think, is Tennessee going to take Cam Ward?
I don't think so. I don't get that sense.
Okay.
And I think it's very telling that they are having these guys in for private workouts this week. This is the earliest I've ever heard of a team bringing players in after the combine. And I think they're doing that because they want a day with these guys so they can trade this pick. But they want to have that meeting first so they can say, just in case we miss something, let's bring in Cam Ward. They're bringing in Shedeur Sanders. They're going to have an Abdul Carter. And I think you make that decision probably very soon after this week of, okay, Cleveland Browns, New York Giants, whoever it is, we're now open for business. And not only are we open for business, we're far enough along in the process that we can make kind of an educated decision. But I don't get the sense right now that the Titans feel like Cam Ward is going to turn this football team around.
He's Matt Miller, ESPN NFL draft analyst. I always look at teams where coaching staffs that they split the season. Like it's the first 8 or 9 games because they may not survive after 8 or 9 games. The Giants situation, they have to win in those first 8 or 9 games. And that's the tricky part. Aaron Rodgers gives you a better chance than Cam Ward will or Shedeur Sanders. There's probably a few other coaching staffs that have, if you're in your second or third year as a head coach, not your first year like Aaron Glenn, but that's where I don't know, do the Giants play it safe from the coaching perspective, trying to keep your job, and you take Aaron Rodgers instead of Cam Ward?
I think so. I think that's why they were so all in on Matthew Stafford, and it was no surprise. I expect they'll be in on Sam Darnold to some degree, as long as he's not franchise tagged today, which sounds like he won't be. And I don't know if Sam wants to go back to New York, right? There's that whole other element of it. But I think in most years you would say, draft the young quarterback, and if he shows promise, you keep your job because then you have the hope of, well, we got to develop this quarterback. I don't know that the quarterbacks this year are to that level that if you're Brian Dable or even Kevin Stefanski necessarily, where you say, I'm going to put my job on this guy who, did you feel at any point during the college football season that Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders were the best quarterback in college? I know they led college in touchdowns, but I never watched on a Saturday and thought, God, this guy's the best quarterback in college football, like I did Jaden Daniels or like I did Joe Burrow. You don't get that level of conviction with these guys. So I do feel like that's where we're getting teams that are saying, Cleveland's different. They have to draft a quarterback because of Deshaun Watson. But with the Titans, the Giants, it's, maybe we just bring in some competition here. Maybe we try the bridge quarterback situation for another season. And then if we keep our jobs, then we'll worry about what 2026 might look like.
The big reason why we wanted to have you on is obviously hand size. Jalen Milroe's hand size. His hands got bigger since the Senior Bowl. How does that happen?
Almost an inch bigger, not like an incremental. He grew out his fingernails, an inch bigger. I've talked to hand surgeons this week. How quickly could you do a finger extension? I don't know, what's going on. The honest answer is, I think what happened at the Senior Bowl is they measured his left hand, for example, and at the combine they measured his right hand. That will happen. That's the only thing I can come up with. You see measurement disparities, and there's some gamesmanship to this. I think it was it Brandon Allen coming out of Arkansas like 10 years ago that was doing the hand stretches to get his hands bigger, and it actually worked. So I want to talk to Cam Ward. I want to find this out. I have a message into his dad, Calvin, to find out the answer to this because to Jalen Milroe. I have a message into his agent to find this out. I got to find out because I've never heard of an inch. That's a lot. That's a big time hand growth.
And I'm wondering about NFL teams who fell in love with the running game. If other teams will follow suit in the draft, will we see an uptick in that you won't be afraid to draft a running back or two in the first round?
I think you won't be afraid, and you also won't get the public backlash, except for from Mel Kiper, who says you should never draft a running back in the first round. Otherwise, you're not going to get your beat reporters in there saying, oh my God, I can't believe we took Ashton Genty in the top 10, or we took Omarion Hampton in the top 30. I think you can point to Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs even as examples of drafting a guy in the first round, they can come in and be the backbone of your offense. I think more importantly, if you have your quarterback, if you're a team that has that figured out, that's the time to draft a running back now, because you have that position solved and you can go back to being a balanced team. But this is one of the best running back classes, if not the best running back class I've ever seen. And I've been doing this for 15 years. So I think we've got a shot to have a record for the modern era, which would be 30 running backs drafted. The last time that happened was 2017, which was, Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, players like that. So I don't know that we see three fly off the board in the top 15 necessarily, but feel pretty confidently we could see three in the top 30 picks.
I don't know if Travis Hunter or his agent has said anything, but is there going to be any blowback if he doesn't want to go to a team because of how he thinks they would use him or not use him?
Yeah. I haven't heard anything about that. That would be fascinating. I think the sense that I've got is that Travis just loves football so much. He does want to go somewhere where he can play both ways. And it truly is like his belief that he will make that team better by doing both. But I think that is an important part of the next 45 days is him having those conversations with teams. And I said before the combine, my number one question to him, if I was a general manager, would be, what if we said you can only play one way? Which side is that? What do you prefer? I personally think that he would be better as a wide receiver. I have friends in the league who think he would be better at corner. So there is kind of this polarization about which side would he be better at. But I think ultimately it comes down to which side. Like, do you have a love for one side more than the other? Or do you care that wide receivers make double what corners do?
Yeah.
Has that factored into your decision-making process or the longevity? He's 188 pounds, 6 foot, 188 pounds. I don't personally want him tackling AJ Brown 15 times a game. I would rather him be trying to evade those guys than go out and initiate contact. So there is a lot to that. I know he says he can play both ways. I think he can try. My statement has been, it is very hard to be great at one position in the NFL, just mentally. It's so hard. So now we're going to divide that time to a rookie and say, hey, not only welcome to the NFL, bud, but now you got to learn two very, very hard positions to transition to the NFL, where we don't see guys as rookies oftentimes have great years as corners, sometimes at receiver, but we're asking him to learn two very hard positions at the same time. I don't know how feasible that is.
He said that it's tougher to do what he's trying to do than what Shohei Ohtani does by hitting and pitching. Your thoughts?
I think hitting a baseball is the hardest thing in sports. So I'm going to respectfully disagree. As someone who could do neither, right? It's easy to sit here in my quarter zip and say one's easier than the other, but I think hitting a baseball when it's 100 miles an hour is the hardest thing in sports. And then to turn around and be a dominant pitcher. Now, to Travis's point, he said Shohei only pitches once every 5 games. That's 5 days, by the way. Travis will only have to play football once every 7 days. So if we're being honest about the statements, they're both getting some breaks in there. But I think what Shohei does is unprecedented.
Great to talk to you. Is there anybody that we should keep an eye on that you would consider, given what happened at the Combine, that really affected their draft status?
Yeah, I think Nick Emanwari, the safety from South Carolina, went from being a late first rounder to maybe a top 15 pick to be 6'3", 220, to run a 4.3. He looks like Derwin James out there. He has ball skills. He had 4 picks, 5 pass breakups this year. He's a great tackler as well. So I still think as we try to figure out how to handle mobile quarterbacks, defenders like him are the answer. So I think he's the biggest riser coming out of it all.
Great to talk to you. We'll talk to you again. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Dan.
That's Matt Miller, ESPN NFL draft analyst.